That's it for us tonight. Miss Shannon, take it away.
We don't have any cool nicknames around here, but we're going to work on that, Laura. Thank you. Here's what we have coming up tonight.
Heated words and pointed accusations today on Capitol Hill.
She has a limited memory.
Now we wait to see who blinks first on DACA and a potential government shutdown.
I think somebody on the staff gave him really bad advice.
Ed Henry working the phones, finding out what's next. Chris Stirewall weighing the odds of a shutdown. Peter Ducey investigating what could be a stunning plan in the works, a crackdown on sanctuary city leaders.
The Department of Justice is reviewing what avenues might be available.
And the trial of an illegal alien facing murder charges in the deaths of 2 California deputies kicks off with chaos.
We killed more of them.
We'll debate what this trial means for the sanctuary state debate.
I wonder if I would even be here today, talking to you about my loss, if the government better enforced immigration law.
President Trump declares today National Religious Freedom Day. So how is the president doing on that front?
Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. Behind closed doors tonight, House Republican leaders reportedly pitching a new strategy for getting Democrats on board with a funding deal before that midnight Friday deadline when the money runs out and the shutdown gets real. The Hill website reporting the offer includes funding for the Children's Health Insurance Program and the delay of some of Obamacare's medical device and Cadillac health plan taxes. But it's what it doesn't include that is going to be the sticking point, a resolution for some 800,000 people who are in this country illegally. We've got team coverage tonight. Peter Ducey looking into an administration report linking terrorism with our broken immigration system full of holes. Chad Pergram over on Capitol Hill with all the behind-the-scenes scoop from this Steve Bannon hearing today. And we begin with Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry on efforts to keep the government open while putting the president's controversial comments behind him. Good evening, Ed.
Shannon, great to see you. Today's big Senate hearing was supposed to be contentious because it was going to be all about President Trump's plan to build a wall on the southern border. It got contentious, but for another reason, about what he said or didn't say behind closed doors about Haiti and various African countries last week. Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen held firm in saying she did not hear the president utter the word asshole. Leading Democrat Cory Booker to charge that what he called her silence and amnesia made her complicit in the president's comments. Nielsen clearly trying to pivot and change the narrative, send a signal to the president's political base that the focus should not be on his words but on deeds, and that the fact that he is taking action to crack down on illegal immigration. The secretary announcing today the administration is talking to federal prosecutors about criminal charges against local officials in sanctuary cities that refuse to follow through on federal orders to deport criminals. Also new today, the Department of Justice revealed it's going to try and go directly to the Supreme Court to fast-track its appeal of a federal judge's ruling in San Francisco that new DACA applications can start. As the head of the Justice Department, Attorney General Jeff Sessions told Fox tonight, enough is enough.
What good does it do to bring in somebody who's illiterate in their own country, has no skills, and is going to struggle in our country and not be successful? That is not what a good nation should do, and we need to get away from it.
But Republican Lindsey Graham today charged that's a dramatic turn from 1 week ago today, when the president gathered leaders in both parties in the cabinet room and said he wanted a bipartisan deal where he would take care of the DACA kids, quote, with love, while also tightening border security. Graham charges that last Thursday morning around 10 a.m., he and Democratic Senator Dick Durbin called over to the president to read him in on a bipartisan deal they were putting together. But by the time they made it to the Oval Office at noon, someone on the White House staff, like senior advisor Stephen Miller, a hardliner on immigration, had convinced the president to turn against the deal. Here's Graham lashing out today.
Something happened between 10 and 12, and I like Secretary Nielsen. She's a nice person. And we'll get to the bottom of this, but here's what's going to matter. How does it end? How does it end? Does it end with the government shutting down? We cannot do this with people in charge at the White House who have an irrational view of how to fix immigration.
Well, they did not take kindly to that at the White House. A senior administration official fired back to me That is not how this played out. This official said Graham and Durbin begged for an Oval Office meeting to present their own deal that went around a framework that House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy was already working on with conservatives. This official declaring of Graham, quote, he tried to sabotage the framework. Nobody knew what was in the damn Graham plan. The president was frustrated and hit him with questions, and Lindsey had no expletive answers, this official said, so the president shut him down. So the question now tonight is, will the government shut down, with some Democrats insisting they will not support a budget deal to keep the government open without a clean DACA bill? Well, I spoke to the senior administration official who told me tonight, quote, we can call that bluff all day long, meaning that the White House believes that they're going to dig in and demand that they get a broader deal where, yes, there's codifying DACA, but also funding for the wall, an end to chain migration, and an end to the visa lottery program. That's a lot to get done by the end of the week. They're still hopeful at the White House they can do it, Shannon.
Well, burning the midnight oil there. Ed Henry, thank you very much. The president this evening linking immigration reform to a new report on terrorism. He says it shows that nearly 3 in 4 individuals convicted of terrorism-related charges since 2001 are foreign-born. We have submitted to Congress a list of resources and reforms we need to keep America safe, including moving away from a random chain migration and lottery system to one that is merit-based. And DHS Secretary Nielsen says those numbers are just the beginning.
This does not include those convicted of domestic terrorism or those convicted on separate charges or those convicted in state courts. And it does not, of course, include those that law enforcement has yet to encounter. This report, unfortunately, is likely just the tip of the iceberg.
Peter Ducey is looking into the controversial report, breaking down the numbers. He joins us now live. Hi, Peter.
Shannon, there's a reason the White House is not budging on immigration talks. They want to end chain migration. They want to end the visa lottery program because their Department of Homeland Security just turned out some new numbers that blame those policies for terrorist attacks and plots. The new DHS report finds that between 9/11 and the end of 2016, out of the 549 people convicted of international terrorism in the U.S., 402 of them were either not U.S. citizens or they were foreign-born and then naturalized. That's 73%. There is no breakdown available of how many came here using chain migration or a visa won in a lottery system, but the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, breaks it down like this. He says, quote, our law enforcement professionals do amazing work, but it is simply not reasonable to keep asking them to risk their lives to enforce the law while we admit thousands every year without sufficient knowledge about their backgrounds. However, some Democratic lawmakers now think that the administration's attempt to end chain migration is off base.
Someone can bring in an entire family tree, which includes just about anybody you can think of, and that is not how migration works.
And tonight, there is new reason to think the feds could start majorly cracking down on sanctuary cities where state and local lawmakers are ignoring federal requests for cooperation with immigration authorities very soon, because the DHS chief, Kirstjen Nielsen, revealed there is talk at Maine Justice of arresting mayors and others who will not play ball.
My question is whether DHS is currently working with the Justice Department to bring any criminal charges against state or local officials.
I believe the request was made. The Department of Justice is reviewing what avenues might be available.
So while much of the public posturing about an immigration deal has been about DACA and people brought here illegally as little kids, the administration is highlighting instead what they see as the public safety risk of crimes committed by illegal immigrants. Shannon.
All right, Peter Ducey, thank you very much. And a new report alleges congressional investigations into the infamous dirty dossier are going beyond the Justice Department and FBI and are now looking into a possible connection to former President Obama's State Department. The Washington Examiner reporting that House Intelligence Committee members may be looking into what individual State Department officials may have done to help ex-British agent Christopher Steele compile the dossier on President Trump. Well, reporters were not allowed in, but we're told Steve Bannon invoked executive privilege tonight in his House Intelligence Committee testimony, making it tougher to find out what he meant or actually said when he allegedly called that Donald Trump Jr. meeting at Trump Tower with a Russian lawyer treasonous. The White House backing its former chief strategist in this way. Check it out.
As with all congressional inquiries touching upon the White House, Congress must consult with the White House prior to obtaining confidential material. This is part of a judicially recognized process that goes back decades. We've been cooperating fully with these ongoing investigations and encourage the committees to work with us to find an appropriate accommodation in order to ensure Congress obtains information necessary to its legitimate interests.
All right, a lot to parse there. Fox News senior Capitol Hill producer Chad Pergram has been breaking scoop from inside this meeting all day. Joins us now with details. What can you tell us tonight, Chad?
Well, the House Intelligence Committee was closed today. Once those doors close, I was told long ago by a member of the Intelligence Committee that those of us on the outside always want to know what's going inside. And boy, we sure wanted to know what was happening in there today. And truth be told, we kind of found out it was pretty chaotic. Steve Bannon was brought up to talk about the Russia investigation, and things were going along rather swimmingly for the first hour and a half. And then, in the words of several sources, things got squirrely. And that's why I talked to Mike Conaway, Republican of Texas, who is a member of the Intelligence Committee.
We started today at a voluntary basis, transitioned to a subpoena midday, continued to ask questions. We've now recessed. The subpoena remains in effect, and we will work to get the answers that we want to our questions.
And what prompted that change partway about an hour?
We weren't getting all the answers that we wanted, and so we subpoenaed Mr. Bannon to try to compel answers.
Now, think about how strange this is to have a witness there and suddenly they say, wait a minute, I can't answer things about the transition. I've been told by the White House counsel that I can't answer about things that happened when I was on the White House staff. And then he clammed up. And this is where one source said to me that this was a, quote, BS privilege. There's no such thing as a transition privilege. And this is where Democrats and Republicans got together. Listen to what Trey Gowdy, Republican from South Carolina, had to say about this.
It is the most tortured analysis of executive privilege I have ever heard of.
Now, you can have executive privilege if you're talking to the president, but anything out that scope, it starts to get a little bit strange. What they have done, and you heard what Mike Conaway said, the subpoena still applies, and they're going to have him back before the Intelligence Committee, Steve Bannon, on Thursday afternoon. Now, here is the schedule. Tomorrow, Rick Dearborn, the former deputy White House chief of staff and campaign official, transition official, he's going to appear. Also, Corey Lewandowski. And then on Friday, we're going to have Hope Hicks, the White House communications director, Shannon.
All right. Now, Chad, how much does this have to do, this, asserting the subpoena as you have a witness sitting there, to do with Congress trying to kind of reassert some control over these various investigations and forcing a witness to comply with them when they've got questions of their own?
That has a lot to do with it because, Congress takes its first Article 1 responsibilities in the Constitution very seriously. And that's what was so dramatic today when you have a very controversial, almost polarizing witness like Steve Bannon coming up here. You have Democrats who certainly aren't on his side. You may have had Republicans who may have sided with him at one point. And don't forget that a lot of people thought that he single-handedly helped them lose the Alabama Senate race a couple of weeks ago, Roy Moore versus Doug Jones. Mitch McConnell pretty much said as much a couple of weeks ago. So Steve Bannon does not have a lot of allies on Capitol Hill. So this is what was unique, where you have Democrats and Republicans on that committee that has often been at each other's throats, Democrats and Republicans, suddenly getting together and say, we need to have this witness and we need to hear from him.
See, Steve Bannon is bringing people together, Chad. That's the bottom line of the story tonight. Thank you for all of your tireless work on this story today. We appreciate it, Chad.
Anytime, Shannon.
All right, as we take closer to the possibility of a shutdown, many on both sides seem to be conceding it's going to be impossible to get a comprehensive long-term funding deal done that includes addressing the DACA situation by Friday. So did the president's rough language behind closed doors give Democrats the tool they needed to now publicly force his hand? Here's Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
If you want to begin the long road back to prove you're not prejudiced or bigoted, support the bipartisan compromise, one that was aimed at meeting the concerns you voiced. Give the Dreamers safety here in America and bolster border security at the same time. This may be the last train leaving the station. President Trump needs to get on board.
All right, so what if he says no thanks, doesn't get on that train, and we instead end up with a shutdown? Chris Stirewalt is Fox News politics editor and author of the Halftime Report, joins us live.
Oh, dear.
All right, we are ready to talk your daily odds on whether you think we are heading to a shutdown.
Well, it depends on whether or not Paul Ryan was whistling past the graveyard tonight. So the House Speaker says they've got the votes, or he believes they can get the votes, to have a Republican-only 1-month extension of current spending levels and, as you mentioned before, a 6-year deal, which is something that will mollify a lot of Republicans who are anxious, a 6-year deal on a program that basically provides health insurance for many million poor kids. So this is the deal that Ryan thinks he can have. If they can do it, if he can get to 219 votes and push it through on Republican-only votes, it's going to be hard for Democrats in the Senate to say, no, shut down the government now. We don't want a month to negotiate. That's the House position. Ryan hopes, and he also hopes, that the Freedom Caucus doesn't take away the votes that he needs to get it through. But that's his hope, is that he can now leverage on Democrats and say, hey, we just need another month to work on DACA. Give us the time.
Yeah, it sounds like tonight that there is some reporting from Chad and from others that Mark Meadows of the Freedom Caucus is suggesting that they have the votes to block this if that's what they decide to do. Okay, I want to play a little bit of what Senator Tom Cotton, a Republican, has to say about this potential shutdown.
If the Democrats want to shut down the government over this, they can. They have the ability to filibuster any bill in the Senate. I don't think that will work out very well for them, so I suspect they will not.
One of the reasons that I think we might have a shutdown, whether it's this Friday or whether it's in a month or whenever we get there, one of the reasons that I think it is increasingly likely that we have a shutdown is that both parties are arrogant. Both parties feel like, oh, we'll do better in the shutdown than you will. You know, there's snakes in the house, so we're gonna light it on fire, and we'll come out of this okay. Somebody is wrong in this scenario. One of these two parties is wrong in this scenario. And I think part of what they're missing is that we've never been here before. We started the modern budgeting era in 1974 with the change in rules. We have never in that whole time had a shutdown when one party controlled both Congress and the White House. The calculus is different here. The Republicans are going to get a lot of blame, but also the Republicans in the White House can act differently towards the shutdown. They can mitigate the factors. They can make sure that things are prioritized and paid on time. Over on this column, they can push off the harmful side effects. So everybody needs to think anew and act anew about the shutdowns in the Trump era.
Well, it's interesting because we hear from one of the senior Democrats over on the Senate side, Patrick Leahy, and now he sounds like he's trying to play the president's game with him about publicly calling him out and making suggestions about how this is going to make him look. Here's what he said.
The Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, and they control the presidency. The government stays open if they want to stay open. It shuts down if they want it to shut down. It'd be humiliating for the United States. It'd be humiliating for the president. I'd be amazed he'd want to humiliate himself that way.
Talking about the president being publicly humiliated, that's the kind of thing I think that would get under his skin.
That would, and of course it would be humiliating for Republicans in the sense that they do have control of both houses. Now look, they rely on 9 Democrats, because remember, they don't have budget reconciliation anymore. They use that for the tax cut. So this would be bad for them if they couldn't find a way to get 9 Democrats on board to keep the government open. Question is, how much heat comes down on Democrats if they are seen in sort of the Ted Cruzian role from 2013 of saying, this issue is not related to keeping the government open. This issue is not about keeping the government open, but unless you give us what we want on this unrelated social issue, we will not allow normal function to be restored. So everybody's got a lot of fat in the fire here, and it could be a lot of, as the president would say, American carnage out there if this gets started.
Yeah, and it's all about messaging in these fights like this. So we'll see who is better at controlling that. And we know oftentimes it's the Democrats when it comes to these shutdowns. All right, Chris Direwall, great to see you.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for not shutting us down. Okay, new reaction tonight to President Trump getting a clean bill of health from the same doctor who's examined past presidents. But you know, it doesn't seem good enough to kill a key Democratic talking point for some, that he is just not fit for office. Sounds like some on the left are not swallowing the pill. We'll debate. And we go to Vancouver for a report on Trump diplomacy. Allies from the Korean War looking for new solutions to the age-old problem. And illegal immigrants go on trial tonight. What one of them said inside the courtroom today will shock you. A full report just ahead. As the DACA deal versus government shutdown debate rages here in Washington, the real-life toll that illegal immigration can take was front and center in a Sacramento courtroom today. In a trial that's getting off to, frankly, a chaotic start. Trace Gallagher joins us live with more. Hey, Trace.
Hi, Shannon. Much like the man who shot and killed Kate Steinle, Luis Bracamontes was for years part of the revolving door of illegal immigration, arrested for drugs multiple times, deported multiple times, and yet in October of 2014, Bracamontes and his wife were sitting in a suspicious vehicle in the parking lot of a Sacramento Motel 6. When deputies came to check out the car, Bracamontes allegedly opened fire with an illegal weapon, killing Deputy Danny Oliver and wounding his partner. The couple then fled the scene and carjacked numerous vehicles until they were pursued by more deputies. Gunfire was exchanged, and Deputy Michael Davis Jr. was also shot and killed. Bracamontes and his wife were later apprehended. And in 2015, Deputy Oliver's wife spoke before Congress. Watch.
Turned off, I think the order was only through.
Will break up soon?
Turned off, I think the order was only through.
Yeah, we'll get that one later. Now, Luis Bracamontes and his wife are on trial for the murders. Throughout the court proceedings, Bracamontes has had repeated outbursts admitting he was guilty, asking to be executed, and trying to fire his public defenders. And today he had more outbursts in court. His attorneys have asked the judge numerous times to rule that Bracamontes is mentally unfit for trial, and numerous times the judge has refused. Bracamontes and his wife are being tried together. She faces life in prison. He faces the death penalty. Separately, we should note that a longtime advocate for illegal immigrants in Seattle has now been detained, is now herself facing deportation. Maru Mora Villalpando, who's been in the U.S. for 25 years, thinks she's being targeted because of her activism, and that information was turned over to Immigration and Customs Enforcement by the Washington State Department of Licensing, despite Governor Jay Inslee saying state workers would not act as immigration agents. ICE says her case is under legal review. Shannon.
All right. Trace Gallagher live for us in L.A. tonight. Thank you. The Trump administration is turning to the Supreme Court after a federal judge ruled last week to block his decision to end DACA, essentially saying the current president doesn't have the authority to undo something his predecessor, another president, did through executive action. Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced he will appeal the decision to both the Ninth Circuit and then skip over the normal order of appeal and go directly to the Supreme Court as well. President Trump's physician declaring the commander-in-chief to be in excellent health during today's White House press briefing, but many in the media could not seem to accept that, repeatedly peppering the doctor with questions about the president's mental stability and overall health, even asking about his life expectancy.
Can you explain to me how a guy who eats McDonald's and fried chicken and all those Diet Cokes and who never exercises is in as good a shape as you say he's in?
It's called genetics. I don't know. It's some people have, just great genes. I told the president that if he had a healthier diet over the last 20 years, he might live to be 200 years old.
Don't terrify the press corps. They hear 200. Donald Trump, they're not going to make it. All right, Larry O'Connor is a radio host and associate opinion editor at the Washington Times, and Richard Fowler, a Fox News contributor and syndicated radio host. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
It's good to be here.
You know, when they heard 200, the press corps was like, oh.
Let's all go on the Trump diet, though, right? Can we agree on that?
I will pass on the Trump diet because I add pounds like it's going out of style.
That's what I'm saying. But I mean, listen, they pressed and pressed. He says genetics. That's kind of a sweet setup, Richard.
It's definitely a sweet setup. I got to give the president credit for this one. I think the ideal of putting your sort of doing a drop-dead press conference, we haven't seen this since Alexa the West Wing the last season, to do a question and make sure you answer every question until there's no question left. And that's exactly what his lawyer did today, and it was a very, very smart political move and press move by the president. Yeah,
his doctor.
Yeah.
And plus, we all decided this doctor is very telegenic.
Yeah.
He's like fit, and he's got his uniform on and everything, and he just seemed like he was willing to take all these questions.
Yeah, when your doctor's an admiral, you know it's got a little authority behind it.
It's got to be serious. Okay, so another question they could not stop asking about was this cognitive test the president had taken. He asked for it. He got a perfect score, 30 out of 30. They still had questions about his mental fitness and ability. Here's a little bit more of that.
The president is mentally very sharp, very intact. And
Do you believe he is fit for duty?
Absolutely, he's fit for duty. I think he will remain fit for duty for the remainder of this term and even for the remainder of another term if he's elected.
Again, Larry, information that press corps may not want to hear. But he says, yes, he's mentally fit, he's fit for duty. But he was asked some version of that question over and over again. How can you be sure? How can you know?
They asked him about that. They asked him about a stroke. They asked him about Alzheimer's. They asked him, for as long as I've been alive, my memory of how the press treats conservative Republicans who happen to win the White House is that they are stupid, they are evil, or they are crazy, or they're losing it. I mean, that is really how they categorize all of the Republicans who end up winning the White House. They really beclowned themselves today. The media did. It was an embarrassment. You're right. He stood up there, Richard, and answered every question. The pathetic thing is there were 50 minutes worth of questions. Why were there so many questions about the president's health report?
And by the way, I like that the word beclowning is coming back. I don't know if it's a new word, if it's an old word that's been brought back. But it makes me laugh whenever I hear it.
You can thank the D.C. journalists for it. They own it. There's a picture of them next to the word beclowning in the Webster.
Okay, all right.
I think Larry's onto something. The only difference I would say is what you see with other Republican presidents, both Reagan and Bush, I think to be familiar, both Father Bush and Son Bush, is they had a little bit more class when handling a press who was a little bit adversarial. What Trump is sort of doing.
A little bit adversarial.
Well, I was trying to be nice. But what Trump is doing here is this whole ideal of I'm going to sort of take them on WWE style. And I'm not sure how history will record that. I think history will record for President George W. Bush, the last one. They would say, his style and grace made him a better president. What will this say about President Trump is going to be the question that we ask.
Okay, I want to make sure that we get to our other topic that we have with you guys. Is the president? He had that meeting months ago with, as he calls them, Chuck and Nancy, the top Democratic leaders from the Hill. Came out. There was talk about we have a deal on immigration or something. The right went crazy, and then he was like, no, we have a deal, but with these 70 things. I think it was 70 plus things. So he's been back and forth. Last week, some on the right thought he was too easy on them in this meeting. Ann Coulter was among them. Here is some of what she's had to say.
When Kevin McCarthy is the hardliner on immigration in the room, I think we can call this the lowest day in the Trump presidency. I mean, he was clearly trying to overcome the bad press of this Michael Wolff book by showing, he's in command. But in fact, what he did was fulfill every description of him in the Michael Wolff book.
Okay, quickly from both of you, I want to get reaction. Larry, we'll start with you about where the president is going now on immigration. Hard right, somewhere in the middle?
Well, I think
Chuck and Nancy?
It seems to me, other than one issue, the president is still signaling now that he's wanting to do exactly what he said he was going to do when he ran for president. It's not hard right, it's not hard left, it's not in the middle. It's enforcing the law as written and making sure that the country is secure. That's what a president's supposed to do. The one thing he's given on is he's agreed to some kind of deal to allow the DACA provisions to go forward for those 700,000 Dreamers that were unconstitutionally protected by President Obama. He didn't say he was going to do that when he ran. Now he said, okay, fine, I'll go ahead and do that. It's time for the Democrats to step up and say, okay, you've given something, Trump, we'll give something.
What do you think, Richard? Because we get to Friday without a DACA protection. You have a number of Democrats now publicly saying, we're willing to shut down the government over that.
No, I think this is going to be a very tough issue for the president. I think immigration, he ran on a very hard line, and I think, honestly, that line is softening. Remember, he ran and said that he's going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. Now we know the American voter is going to pay for it, and we're not really sure if he's going to get that wall with this Congress. And so I think this president has realized that he's going to have to move to the left a little bit if he wants anything done on immigration or if he wants the rest of his agenda done.
And Larry's saying he has.
He's moved to the left by even agreeing.
I think he's got to move further to the left. And I think in the Lindsey Graham, Dick Durbin deal, we saw over $1 billion for a wall, $1 billion for border security, but the president thought that wasn't enough. And I think he needs to really reconsider.
The White House did not take that.
Yeah, any immigration deal packaged with Dick Durbin and Lindsey Graham is not a deal that's going to pass.
It brought up a lot of cries of amnesty, as it often does.
I get that, but anytime the president's listening to Ann Coulter, he loses a good chunk of America because she represents a very, very small part of it.
A big chunk of America voted for him, though, because of the wall and all these other promises.
Right.
So we'll see where they get to by Friday or beyond. Richard and Larry, always great to have you here.
Great to have you, too.
Okay.
I mean, great to be had.
And yes, and neither one of you have
This isn't going the right way.
All right, more news right after this break. Tensions over North Korea's missile program reportedly prompted a secret meeting. Fox News has confirmed today that National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster was in San Francisco this past weekend to meet with officials from South Korea and Japan. Tonight, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is co-hosting with Canada talks with 20 countries on threats from North Korea. Correspondent Rich Edson is traveling with the secretary, has the latest for us from Vancouver. Rich?
Good evening, Shannon. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says the United States and allies will push even stronger sanctions against North Korea if it continues its provocations. The secretary just wrapped a 20-country summit here in Vancouver discussing ways to combat North Korean smuggling and offered a blunt assessment of the North Korean threat.
We all need to be very sober and clear-eyed about the current situation. As North Korea has continued to make significant advances in both its nuclear weapons, the lethality of those weapons, we have to recognize that that threat is growing.
Secretary Tillerson refused to comment on whether the Trump administration is considering a limited so-called bloody nose strike against North Korea. He says for now, North Korea must be willing to negotiate.
We will never accept them as a nuclear power. And so it's time to talk, but they have to take the step that says they want to talk.
The secretary also refused to comment on whether President Trump has spoken directly to Kim Jong-un. The secretary says we are at a tenuous stage. When we want to get into who's talking to who, we will announce it. And as African governments have condemned the president's reported comments on certain countries, the secretary says nothing has changed in the relationship between the United States and African nations, saying that the U.S. remains generous to those countries and that they continue to work together on issues like counterterrorism. Shannon?
All right, Rich Edson with the secretary. Thank you so much. If the Trump administration tacks hard to the right on immigration again and targets sanctuary cities, what will that mean politically for vulnerable Republicans in purple or mostly blue states where those cities happen to be? Stick around to hear from Congressman Dave Bratt. He's being targeted himself big time in the midterms. He's here in just seconds. Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen suggesting today that the administration is considering all options for action involving leaders of sanctuary cities when they refuse to cooperate with federal deportation efforts. It comes as some on the left are now comparing immigrations and customs enforcement to Nazis.
When the president says this, basically take them out, that is what the community then is saying, this is fearful for us. This is the Gestapo on us. The troops on the ground of ICE, they're ready to swing into action. Right. Agents are getting on trains and going through the train and spotting people and saying, what is your citizenship?
Here to discuss is Republican Congressman from Virginia, Dave Bratt. And by the way, there are other media outlets, not necessarily right-leaning or conservative, who did a fact check on what she said there about the trains. They couldn't find any evidence of that. But what do you make of those comments?
Yeah, well, that's exactly why they're unfortunate. That's exactly why you need a rational immigration policy. We just had an election on that issue. It was the highlighted issue of the Trump presidential election. Even Bernie, right, concerned with middle-class wages from Trump all the way through Bernie. And then the American people gave us the House and the Senate, and they're expecting some action on this.
Yeah, they're mad at you.
Oh, they're mad. They should be mad. And so it's just key. President Trump has to lead on the Goodlatte bill, Chairman Goodlatte on Judiciary, with McCall, Homeland Security, McSally, Raul Labrador. You've got the entire conference in the Republican House that's got a very good bill with all four chairmen with total expertise on these issues, decades of public policy behind this bill. And so President Trump has to come forward with a loud voice and support that bill. And then our leadership needs to support that bill because the Senate will be where the fight is, right? The Senate, they've rolled us on everything this year. Health care, fail. They haven't done a budget this year. They're probably not going to do a budget next year. Luckily, we got tax through, but we're expecting entirely for them to roll the Durbin bill with Lindsey Graham, for example, is not only DACA, it's DACA plus. And the folks at home should get ready if they have their way.
Go? Because even if you all get something passed on the House side, you need 9 senators, 9 Democrats to come join over the Republicans on the Senate side to get even to the procedural hurdle to get to a vote. You know that's never going to happen on your House bill.
Right. Well, you start negotiating from that strong position, right? Then you negotiate. If you listen to the liberals, right, they thought President Trump came in very strong, right? They were very worried that we're going to have a dramatic move. The Goodlatte is a compromise bill in itself. What the Democrats really want is just for Republicans to vote on a Democrat bill. And if the Senate gets their way, we might end up doing that because this city is more concerned about the dollar, right? Always keep your eye on the money. And so they let these bills go by. But if we fail on this issue, mark my words, today, right on this show a few years from now, this issue, if our party fails, the party's done, right?
Which brings me to this. Washington Examiner outlines what you're facing in the midterms. It says 31 incumbent GOP lawmakers have decided not to run again. About 1/3 of them hail from districts that are at least competitive for a takeover by the Democrats. Congressman Ted Lieu, is vice chair of the House fundraising arm for Democrats, said this: a bigly blue wave is coming this November. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi says this: history is on our side. And it is. I mean, when it comes to midterms for the president in power, usually doesn't go well. A lot of people predicting this is going to be real bad for you.
No, there's definitely a wave coming. A wave hit Virginia. But that shows you we have to get our act together. I mean, we have tax, right? That's not enough. Now, DACA, Republicans ran on it. Either the base is going to come out excited or they're going to stay at home and we're going to lose by 50, right? So that issue is just key. There's some other issues we can do too, right? But the economic growth will be key. If that kicks in before November, things are going to be a lot better. Right now, it's already, all the signs are positive on the economy back home, small businesses popping, Wall Street, the bonuses. Economic growth is projected to be 4% in the next quarter. So a lot of good news. If that hits my folks' pocketbooks, usually elections, the pocketbook's the #1 issue. So,
and they're coming after you hard. We have we've looked at all the ads and the people that are a lot of people want your seat. So keep us updated. It's a long time between now and November. A lot's going to happen, but we'll see you before then.
Thank you, Shannon.
Congressman, great to have you.
Appreciate it.
All right, no fake news here. It is time for a real news roundup. One of New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy's first moves in office, making plans to establish a state agency for defensive protection of illegal immigrants. The Democratic former Goldman Sachs executive says he wants the organization to be a government agency that illegal immigrants can trust. An 11-year-old girl in Toronto, Canada, is getting worldwide attention by claiming a man attacked her and tried to cut off her hijab. The hate crime stirred outrage and got Prime Minister Justin Trudeau involved. He tweeted, anti-Islamic violence, quote, is not what Canada is. Turns out he's right. Toronto police concluding tonight that the events didn't happen, and they've concluded their investigation. Well, teens doing crazy things is not news, but daring each other to eat laundry detergent, unfortunately, that is real news. It's become known as the Tide Pod Challenge. Teens posting videos of themselves doing it. According to Consumer Reports, the pods are potentially toxic because they often contain ethanol, hydrogen peroxide, and long-chain polymers, which can burn the mouth, digestive system, and stomach, and they can actually be fatal if the ingredients enter your bloodstream. You have been warned. Well, President Trump declares today National Religious Freedom Day, but critics say those liberties are coming at the expense of others' rights. We'll take a look at some of the big cases the Supreme Court and other courts are expected to decide on that front. And wintry weather wreaking havoc on roadways across much of the South, but some folks, they're still finding a way to have fun. Today, January 16th, honors what Americans consider, many of them, their most fundamental and important freedom, religious liberty. In a statement today, the president said this: no American, whether a nun, nurse, baker, or business owner, should be forced to choose between the tenets of faith or adherence to the law. Now, there have been a number of legal disputes on that point, including one now pending before the Supreme Court. My next guest has been involved with many, dozens of them, I'd say. Kelly Shackelford is president and CEO of the First Liberty Institute. Good to have you with us.
Good to be here.
Okay, so when we say religious freedom, what does that mean?
Well, there are a huge number of cases coming down the pipe. Examples. The Bladensburg Veterans Memorial, which has been up for over 90 years.
It's in the shape of a cross.
It's in the shape of a cross. It's been struck down as unconstitutional. That'll be on its way to the Supreme Court soon. If that were upheld, they would have to go and take down veterans memorials all over the country, and that Court of Appeals covers Arlington National Cemetery. They would have to go into Arlington and tear down the large crosses.
Every headstone there has got some religious symbol on it, not just crosses, but other faiths as well.
And the large crosses there in particular would be definitely on the list. But Coach Joe Kennedy, the coach who was fired for going to a knee silently after the game by himself and saying a prayer. President Trump tweeted about that twice as a candidate, saying this shouldn't happen in our country. The Baker case you mentioned, which was argued at the Supreme Court, there's an en banc on Friday. The court is going to look at a case where you have two en banc federal court of appeals going the opposite way on whether county commissioners can pray to open their meetings. So we're just beginning, but I mean, 2018 is going to be a huge religious freedom year.
And this is what you all do, and you see these cases around the country, others within the military as well, and the rights of our servicemen and women. But to the point about the Baker case and the business cases, a lot of people get stuck there because they say, how can you possibly, come down on the side of erring against LGBT rights? The couple who was denied the custom wedding cake at the Supreme Court said that it was a humiliating experience for them, and they're fighting to make sure no one else has to go through that. Dominic Holden of BuzzFeed, he's their civil rights reporter, pointed this out with the president's statement on this. He said, here's the president's Freedom Day proclamation. It gives a nod to Trump administration's belief that religion supersedes gay civil rights laws favoring bakers and such who would turn away same-sex couples. And a lot of people say that it's basically just cover when you use religious freedom to turn people away, that it's bigotry.
Well, all those cases that we've seen, including the case you mentioned at the Supreme Court, in none of those cases did the bakers not serve people who are LGBT. It's just that when they were asked to do a custom cake to celebrate a certain event, that they had different beliefs. And of course, weddings and marriage is a sacred thing to many people. It comes out of their faith. The way I look at this is, people have different beliefs on same-sex marriage. But the one thing I think we as Americans should be able to agree upon is people have a right to have different beliefs on same-sex marriage. And I think we're a big enough country where we can live and everybody can have their freedoms. I don't think really there's anybody that's not going to be able to get a wedding cake if they want to get a cake. And I think we can respect the people who have different beliefs on different issues and accommodate them as well. And we can all live in peace with one another. That's what the founders wanted us to do.
And quickly, because the president appealed so much to evangelicals and others who this is a top issue, and we see today his highest rating with a religious group is with the Mormons, who 61% of them say they approve of him. Quickly, how would you grade how he's doing? Because it was important for a lot of people. It's the reason they voted for him and his Supreme Court appointment. How would you grade him on how he's doing religious freedom?
I think on religious freedom, he's been unbelievably strong and good. From Gorsuch on the Supreme Court, all the lower court judges, how the Justice Department is weighing in with briefs on important cases. I mean, he has really been excellent.
All right, Kelly, keep us updated on all these cases as they work their way through the courts. Great to have you tonight.
Thanks for having me.
All right, who says Southerners can't handle the snow? Looks like some are doing just fine with this freaky weather. Check it out. Dangerous wind chills, ice, and snow causing highway crashes, shutting down schools and closing airports from Texas to Kentucky. It's made a mess for travel, but it's not stopping everyone from enjoying a snow day. As you can see here, the folks have found a way to have fun and even navigate through the snow. We don't advocate that. Be safe. Most watched, most trusted, most grateful you spent the evening with us. Good night from Washington. I'm Shannon Bream.